Chapter 7. Does this strategy work? When you're riding the roller coaster for so many years, it's hard to imagine that there's such a thing as a solid road where you can walk with dignity no matter what else is going on in your life. I know that I could never have imagined such a possibility. A few hundred years ago, a Yid was renting a krechme, a small inn, from the local poets, noblemen. As happened often in that time period, there came a day when the Yid could not pay his rent. The nobleman threw him and his entire family into a dungeon. Every day, the nobleman's servant would place bread and water through a little window in the dungeon, enough bread and water to keep the family alive. Days and weeks passed by. Months passed by. Nobody was able to rescue this family from the dungeon. The months turned into years, and the family developed a system of survival in that cold and gloomy space. Every day they got their food. Here and there, they got other necessities, small conveniences that made their life a little bit more pleasant. As time passed, without even realizing it, the family gave up hope of their life outside of the dungeon. They got used to living where they were. In the beginning, they would spend many hours thinking about how to get out of that damp, miserable hole. But with time, they would wake up in the morning, and instead of thinking about how to get out of the dungeon, they would think about a new way to eat the bread, the only food that was always available to them. They thought about how to make themselves a bit more comfortable during their stay. One day, the father, who was a very old man, gathered around his children and told them a story. He told them of a time when they all used to live in a place where a sun would shine and rain would fall. He told them about tall, leafy trees, vast meadows of grass, and gardens where vegetable peeked up and out through the soft earth. He told them that he felt like the end of his life was drawing near, and he wanted them to know that there was life outside of the dungeon. He blessed them that they should come to know this life, which was better than their current reality in every way. The children had a hard time understanding what their father was saying. They had no memories of life outside of the dungeon. They never knew of a different reality. The story ends with the father crying, begging his children to believe him and to do everything they could to get out of the dungeon and start experiencing life the way it is meant to be. Gullus is like the dungeon. We are locked into a limited reality. We do not see the sunshine of Hashem's presence. We do not see our neshama. And as the situation has stretched into so many years, we've bought into the mindset that dominates this place called Gullus. We believe the rule that our identity is defined by our circumstances and by what we get from the people around us. We think that in order to feel good about ourselves, our situations and circumstances need to be good. We think that if we aren't getting enough validation and love in our lives, we are stuck. If we can't manage to impress people, we're not good enough. If someone else has more than us, they're better than us. It seems as if the only way to be respectable is if we can manage to accomplish respectable goals. Living by these rules is like living in the dungeon. It's not how life is meant to be. It drags us into the darkness of stress, resentment, disappointment, emotional chaos, and shattered relationships. Behind every bad mood that is hard to shake off, behind every moment of feeling stuck, helpless, disempowerment, there's a label that doesn't belong to you or a rule that is not true. I know that if someone would tell this to me years ago, when I was feeling helpless and victimized, I might feel worse about myself because at the time, this idea would have been unrelatable to me. When we are in an emotional dungeon right now, it's hard to accept that we can bring on magnificent light just by making a decision and changing the rules we live by. It seems too simple, especially in the face of our complicated, profound challenges and darkness. This is the challenge of Gullus. It's the challenge of the entire Klal Yisrael. It's the challenge of Hashem's hiddenness. Today, may Hashem remove the veil that conceals him. May he remove all forms of spiritual and emotional darkness. Only Hashem can take us out of our collective gullus. But breaking free of our personal gullus, letting go of the rules that deny His reality, this is our choice, our freedom, and our obligation. We can do it as soon as we recognize that, number one, Hashem's reality makes a practical difference in every aspect of our daily life. And number two, Hashem's value outweighs everything else in the world, and our neshama's value outweighs everything else about ourselves. Hashem is true, and it's also true that He has hidden Himself. So, at any given moment in time, each of us is living in one of these two realities. We can engage in our lives from the perspective of Hashem's hiddenness, or we can engage in our lives from the perspective of His revealed, actual, practical presence. Our default setting is His hiddenness, but we can make the decision to let Hashem's presence be our reality. We can let His awesomeness make a practical difference in this moment, here and now. We can let Hashem's reality say no to the rules that contradict it. And with that, we also say no to shame, worthlessness, self-pity, and disempowerment. Every time we choose to live by Hashem's truth, we are inviting peace, dignity, joy, and sparkling goodness into our lives. Here's the summary of this chapter. It may be difficult to imagine that such wonderful change in your life is possible simply by strengthening your connection with Hashem. But to reject the possibility would be as foolish as looking out of a tiny window, seeing a narrow glimpse of the bustling street below, and deciding that there's nothing else to be seen. Try looking at the world from a different window. Give it a try and let the results speak for themselves. Here are some questions for reflection and connection. In what way does Hashem's hiddenness influence your beliefs about yourself? In what way does Hashem's hiddenness influence your attitude towards other people? In what way does it impact your marriage, your parenting, and other relationships? What would change for you if you would start seeing yourself and other people from the lens of Hashem's absolute, infinite, unchangeable value? Here's a little exercise to grow your connection. In a multi-story building, look at the street below from different windows. Notice how each window offers a completely different perspective of the very same street. Recognize that every situation, every relationship, everything in our world can be viewed from different perspectives.